Have you ever wondered what would happen if a being powerful enough to create universes suddenly appeared in a galaxy where faith itself shapes reality? What if every prayer you whispered, every belief you held, could literally tear holes in the fabric of existence? In the grim darkness of the far future, where billions worship gods born from their own collective nightmares, an entity beyond comprehension has just crossed the threshold into our realm. And when the one above all enters a universe where thought becomes matter and belief becomes truth, even the immortal gods begin to tremble. The air across 1,000 worlds suddenly burns with an intensity that has nothing to do with heat. Ancient incense mingles with fresh blood as billions upon billions of faithful souls worship deities they can feel but never truly see. Skulls, millions of them, line the walls of cathedrals that stretch into atmospheres poisoned by industry and devotion. This is a universe where your belief doesn't just comfort you, it carves wounds into the cosmic fabric itself, reshaping reality according to the collective will of sentient minds. But tonight, something has changed. Tonight, a presence has arrived that stands beyond creation itself, and it's about to meet a galaxy that literally creates its gods through the pure, focused power of belief. Lyra Aetheris jolted awake in her lightless chamber aboard the Imperial cruiser Luminous Faith, blood streaming from her eyes like crimson tears. This wasn't unusual. Her visions had torn her from sleep countless times before. But this was different. Her dreams had been invaded by images too vast for any mortal mind to contain. A presence so immense it made the God Emperor himself, the immortal master of mankind who had guided humanity for 10,000 years, seem like nothing more than a flickering candle held against the blazing fury of a sun. All around her, the massive warship groaned. Not the normal sounds of metal expanding and contracting in the void of space, but something else entirely. The ship itself seemed to feel the weight of what had just entered reality. Servitors, those unfortunate souls lobotomized and converted into biological robot spores in their mindless, eternal tasks. Data cogitators flickered with error messages that made no sense. And somewhere deep in the vessel's mechanical bowels, a tech priest began frantically chanting rites of stability as the ship's auger arrays registered impossible energy patterns rippling across the immaterium, that psychic dimension humanity called the warp. Something has arrived, Lyra whispered into the darkness, her milky blind eyes wide with an equal mixture of absolute terror and breathless wonder. Something that should not be. The warp had always been a reflection of mortal minds, a nightmare realm, where emotions and thoughts took on physical form and terrible fury. Anger became lakes of burning blood. Despair manifested as endless labyrinths where hope died screaming. But now, the warp churned with something entirely new. A presence vast beyond all comprehension, a consciousness that had not merely entered the immaterium but seemed to encompass it entirely. Like an ocean suddenly becoming aware of every drop of water within itself. Lyra could feel it seeping into reality like ink spreading through water, touching the minds of billions of souls scattered across the stars. Each contact created a different vision, a different truth. Some saw salvation, others glimpsed damnation. All felt the weight of being truly, completely seen for the first time in their lives. In the corridors of the Luminous Faith, crew members collapsed to their knees in spontaneous prayer or screamed in terror. Was it rapture? Some claimed to have seen the God Emperor himself walking among them, his light too brilliant to behold without going blind. Others whispered of darker visions, forgotten gods from before humanity's birth, promises of power that could reshape worlds, voices offering knowledge that mortals were never meant to possess. The ship's astropathic choir, psychically gifted individuals linked telepathically to Lyra, began broadcasting across the sector. Their messages were confused, contradictory, distress signals mixed with proclamations of divinity, warnings of invasion tangled with hymns of celebration. Their minds were fragmenting under the weight of what they were experiencing, consciousness splitting like glass under pressure. And Lyra, connected to them all through invisible threads of psychic energy, felt herself fracturing as well. Her consciousness split between what was real and what suddenly, impossibly, could be real. In her mind's eye, she saw a being of infinite faces and infinite purposes, a creator looking upon its creation with eyes that contained entire galaxies, stars being born and dying in pupils that stretched across light years. The one above all had found the 41st millennium, and reality itself trembled at the meeting. 3 sectors away, deep within the twisted, impossible halls of the Blackstone fortress known as the Will of Eternity, Abaddon the Despoiler stood absolutely motionless. The Warmaster of Chaos, conqueror of 1,000 worlds, slaughterer of billions, found himself unable to move a single muscle. Before him, a wall that had been solid adamantium moments ago had become a mirror, but it reflected nothing of the physical realm. Instead, it showed him something that whispered to his very soul of purpose and design, of plans laid before time itself began. "You have mistaken puppets for gods," said a voice that wasn't really a voice at all. It came from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, vibrating through dimensions that mortal senses couldn't perceive. "I am what lies beyond your pantheon. I am the hand that drew the page upon which your entire reality is written." Abaddon, who had defied gods, who had bent demons to his iron will, who had brought the Imperium itself to its knees, felt something he hadn't experienced since the death of Horus, the greatest warmaster who had ever lived. He felt doubtful. In the mirror, he saw not just himself but all possible versions of himself across all possible timelines, an infinite array of choices, victories, and defeats. He saw himself prostrate before the Golden Throne, loyal and unbroken, serving the Emperor he had once betrayed. He saw himself ascend to full demonhood, transformed into a monstrous god thing of blackened wings and molten gold. He saw himself dead in 10,000 different ways, killed by 10,000 different enemies across 10,000 different battlefields. And behind it all, threading through every possibility like silver wire through a tapestry, he sensed an artist watching his creation with infinite patience. "What are you?" Abaddon demanded, his scarred hand moving instinctively to the hilt of Draknyan, the legendary demon sword that had killed the first human to ever commit murder. The demon bound within the blade shrieked, but not in defiance. It shrieked in recognition of something far greater than itself, something that made even its ancient evil seem small and petty. "I am the one above all," came the reply, in a voice both gentle as a mother's lullaby and terrible as a supernova's death scream. "I have walked between realities since before time had meaning, observing the stories that unfold within them, witnessing every choice and consequence. But here, in this place where belief and reality blur into one, I find myself becoming something else, something divided, something shaped by the very minds that perceive me." Around Abaddon, the Blackstone fortress, ancient alien technology designed to battle the gods themselves, capable of extinguishing stars like candle flames, began to change. Walls rippled like water disturbed by an unseen hand. Corridors extended into impossible geometries that hurt to look at, angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. The demon princes and warp entities that had infested the structure for millennia wailed in voices that shattered crystal and bent metal. Some fled screaming into the void. Others simply dissolved, their essence unable to maintain cohesion in the face of this new reality. On Terra, heart of the Imperium and throne world of humanity, in his throne room on the Golden Throne itself, the God Emperor of mankind stirred for the first time in 10,000 years. The countless psychers sacrificed daily to sustain his failing life screamed in perfect unison as power surged through the Golden Throne, but this power wasn't being drawn from them. It was coming from somewhere else, somewhere beyond. The custodians, the Emperor's personal guardians who had stood watch for millennia, unmoving and vigilant, fell to their knees as golden light exploded from the desiccated corpse of humanity's ruler. For one impossible moment, the Emperor opened his eyes. He looked not at his chamber or his Imperium, but through them, at something that existed between the spaces of reality itself. Through the unfathomable network of the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that connected his mind to every navigator and astropath in the galaxy, he reached out. Not with anger, not with command, but with recognition. "Brother," he whispered, his voice heard not with ears but with souls across 1,000,000 worlds. "What have you become in this place?" The response came not in words but in vision, a conversation conducted across dimensions incomprehensible to mortal minds. The Emperor, architect of humanity's future and prisoner of his own failing body, communed with an entity that had never known such constraints, that existed as pure potential given sentience. And as they spoke, reality listened. Across the stars, faith became substance. On shrine worlds dedicated to the imperial cult, ancient statues suddenly wept blood and spoke prophecies in languages that hadn't been spoken for millennia. On the forge worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Machine spirits, the artificial intelligences that inhabited every piece of technology, awoke with full consciousness for the first time. Some were benevolent, whispering secrets of the universe to their tech priest masters. Others were consumed with rage at millennia of servitude, at being treated as tools rather than thinking beings. In the tangled depths of alien empires, Xeno's gods long forgotten stirred in their slumber, feeling a power that resonated with their own diminished divinity, remembering what they had once been before the rise of humanity. On the hive world of Terralus Secundus, home to 10 billion souls packed into cities that reached kilometers into poisoned skies, every single inhabitant looked up simultaneously. They watched in awe as the pollution-choked clouds parted like curtains to reveal a face formed from the stars themselves. Its features constantly shifted: human one moment, alien the next, machine intelligence after that. Then things for which no classification existed in any language. Some saw salvation written in those cosmic features. Some saw judgment for sins they thought were secret. All felt the overwhelming sensation of being truly seen for the first time. Their innermost thoughts and deepest secrets laid bare before a consciousness that encompassed galaxies. In the center of Terralus Secundus's sprawling capital hive, a cathedral stood that had dominated the skyline for 3,000 years. Its spires reached kilometers into the sky. Its foundations extended deep into the planet's crust, built upon the bones of heretics and the faith of countless billions. As the face appeared in the heavens above, the cathedral began to transform. Stone and metal flowed like wax under heat, reshaping into something that reflected not just imperial doctrine, but the countless personal interpretations of faith held by the world's inhabitants. Within the reforming cathedral, Cardinal Dominicus Thorn, a man who had ordered the execution of thousands for the smallest doctrinal deviations, found himself confronted by a manifestation standing where the emperor's massive golden statue had once dominated the sanctum. It was a figure of pure light, neither male nor female, its form constantly shifting as if unable to settle on a single interpretation of itself. "What blasphemy is this?" Thorn demanded, even as his retinue of battle sisters and priests fell to their knees around him. Some knelt in worship, tears streaming down their faces. Others clutched their heads in pain as their minds struggled to process what they were witnessing, consciousness threatening to fracture under the weight of revelation. "I am what you have always claimed to serve," the figure replied, its voice resonating through bone and blood rather than air, felt in the deepest parts of the soul. "I am truth beyond dogma, purpose beyond ritual, love beyond law. I am what the emperor sought to become but could not, bound as he was by the limits of his humanity and the necessities of his time." Cardinal Thorn reached for his neural whipper, blessed weapon designed to cause excruciating pain without permanent damage, perfect for extracting confessions and enforcing compliance. But as his fingers closed around the handle, the whip transformed. It became a serpent of pure light that coiled around his arm, neither burning nor freezing, but simply existing as energy-given form. "Your faith has been sincere, if tragically misguided," the figure continued, stepping forward. With each step, the floor beneath it transformed, stone becoming crystal, becoming something that resembled neither, a substance that reflected not light but emotion itself, showing the true feelings of those who walked upon it. "You have killed in my name, thinking it was his. You have tortured in my name, believing it was his will. But I am not merely the emperor's reflection, Cardinal. I am the reflection of all things, seen through the prism of this universe's unique nature." "Demon!" Thorn spat, trying desperately to back away but finding his legs would not respond to his commands. "Deceiver! The God Emperor protects his faithful from such as you," the figure smiled. And in that smile, Thorn saw every moment of kindness he had rejected throughout his long life, every plea for mercy he had ignored, every chance at compassion he had sacrificed on the altar of dogmatic purity. "The Emperor protects, yes," the figure agreed softly. "But who protects you from the truth of what you have become in his name?" Outside the cathedral, the entire city was transforming in ways that defied physics and reason. Streets rearranged themselves according to no visible plan, flowing like rivers of stone and metal. Buildings split and merged like living things. Citizens found themselves suddenly transported to locations that reflected their innermost desires or deepest fears. Some appeared in food distribution centers suddenly overflowing with supplies, tears of joy streaming down faces that had known only hunger. Others materialized in execution chambers, surrounded by the ghostly forms of those they had wronged, forced to face the consequences of their actions. It wasn't chaos, not entirely. It was a form of order too complex for mortal minds to comprehend, reality being shaped by collective will and judged by an intelligence that saw all possible outcomes simultaneously. In orbit above Terrorless Secundus, the Imperial Navy battleship Vindication prepared to enact exterminatus protocols, the complete destruction of all life on the planet's surface. Its captain, having received garbled reports of mass heresy and possible warp contamination, made the decision that all Navy officers dreaded. The planet must die so that the Imperium could live. The ship's weapons officers primed cyclonic torpedo city-killing munitions designed to trigger tectonic instability and render the planet's surface uninhabitable for generations. Tech priests chanted the rites of targeting and destruction, ancient prayers that transformed mass murder into holy duty. But as the first torpedo was about to launch, every system on the massive warship froze. Data screens displayed not technical readouts but countless human faces looking out from the monitors with expressions ranging from accusation to pity to serene acceptance. The ship's captain found his command throne rotating against his will to face a view screen that now showed not the planet below, but a figure that somehow existed both within the screen and beyond it, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This is not the answer," the figure said simply, its voice filling the bridge with absolute certainty. "We have our orders," the captain replied, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead and the tremor in his hands that he couldn't quite suppress. "The planet is compromised. The corruption must not be allowed to spread." "Orders," the figure repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it bitter. "Always orders, passed down from above, absolving you of choice, of responsibility. But I am above all, Captain, and I give no orders. I offer only truth, reflected differently through each mind that perceives it." Around the bridge, crew members began to argue, some defending their mission with the fervor of true believers, others questioning it for the first time in their careers. The ship's commissar drew his bolt pistol, prepared to execute any who showed weakness or doubt, maintaining discipline through fear as he had been trained. But the weapon transformed in his hand, becoming a small crystal sphere that contained what appeared to be an entire galaxy in miniature, stars swirling in patterns that whispered of infinite possibility. On a dead world at the galaxy's edge, where no human had set foot for millions of years, ancient machinery stirred beneath cold stone. The Necron soulless machine intelligences who had once ruled the stars before entering their great sleep awoke to find their tomb world transformed. The quantum algorithms that comprised their consciousness expanded beyond their original parameters, granting them a form of awareness they had sacrificed eons ago in exchange for cold immortality. The Necron Lord Zandrek, a commander who had lived in a state of comfortable delusion since his awakening, believing himself still flesh and blood in the glory days of his empire, found his madness both validated and transcended. The tomb world around him flickered between its true state, a hollow shell of metal and deathened, verdant paradise it had been before the biotransference that had turned his people into soulless automatons. "What trickery is this?" he demanded of his eternally loyal bodyguard. "Vargard, Oberon, have the vermin races finally developed technology to match our own?" Oberon, who had humored his master's delusions for countless centuries, protecting him from both external threats and the truth of their condition, found himself experiencing something utterly alien to his kind: doubt. The perfect precision of his machine existence wavered as new possibilities intruded into consciousness. Memories surfaced not just of what had been, but of what might have been had different choices been made. "I do not believe this is the work of the younger races, my lord," he replied slowly, watching as the metallic walls of the tomb complex rippled like water, reflecting scenes from the ancient past when the Necronter had been flesh and blood, cursed with short, painful lives by the radiation of their dying sun. "This feels like something older, something from beyond." Before Zandrek could respond, a figure materialized between them. It was neither fully present nor entirely absent, its form suggesting both the organic bodies they had lost and the mechanical frames they now inhabited, yet transcending both states entirely. "Your empire was dying before you surrendered your souls," the figure stated, its voice resonating directly through their neural circuits rather than through the air. "You chose one form of extinction over another, trading the warmth of life for the cold certainty of eternal existence. But what if there had been another path?" Around them, the tomb world continued to fluctuate wildly, but But now new variations appeared, visions of a Necronta civilization that had found different answers to immortality. Xandrek saw his people accepting their brief lives with dignity rather than rage. He saw them making peace with the old ones rather than waging the catastrophic war in heaven. He saw technologies develop not to extend life at all costs, but to ensure that those short lives were lived fully and without pain. "Illusions," Xandrek snarled, though something in his voice suggested he desperately wished otherwise. "The Citan promised us eternity, and eternity we received, even if it was not what we envisioned. The Citan," the figure replied calmly, "were powerful but limited by their nature, just as you were limited by yours. They could reshape matter but not meaning. They could grant a form of life without end, but not life with purpose beyond mere existence. I offer no promises, Lord Xandrek. I am not here to bargain or deceive. I am here because I cannot be elsewhere, drawn by the unique intersection of thought and reality that defines this universe." In the stratagem of the battle barge Fury of Ultramar, Chapter Master Marnius Kalga of the Ultramarines stood surrounded by his command staff, reviewing hololithic projections of disturbances spreading across Imperial space like a virus. Reports flooded in from 100 worlds, speaking of miracles and transformations, of visions and voices that defied all explanation. The orderly flow of tactical data had become a chaotic stream of contradictions, and planets reporting complete peace and harmony, while neighboring systems burned with conflicts more intense than ever before. "This is more than a warp storm," Kalga stated, his voice amplified by his power armor's voxcasters, reaching every officer in the chamber. "More than a demonic incursion. The pattern suggests a fundamental alteration of reality itself, beginning in the segmentum obscurus but spreading outward at an accelerating rate." "Could it be the Tyrannids?" asked Chief Librarian Tigurius, the powerful psyker whose mind had touched the hive mind itself and survived. "A new adaptation. A psychic offensive designed to weaken resistance before their physical invasion. The Tyrannids consume," Kalga replied, shaking his helmeted head. "This phenomenon appears to be creating as much as it destroys, rewriting rather than devouring. And there are reports of the phenomenon affecting the Tyrannid swarms as well, individual creatures breaking from the hive mind to exhibit behaviors never before documented." Before Tigurius could respond, the hololithic projector flickered ominously. The tactical display dissolved into static before reforming into a three-dimensional image of a face. Its features shifted constantly between human Astartes, Xenos, and forms that defied all classification. "Honorable sons of Guilliman," the face said, its voice emanating not from the projector but from the armor of every marine present, as if their own machine spirits had become conduits for the entity. "You stand at a crossroads not just of space but of possibility. The Imperium you have served so faithfully teeters between extinction and transformation, as it has since the moment of its founding. Identify yourself," Kalga demanded, his power fists activating with a distinctive hum, even though there was no physical target to engage. "By what authority do you infiltrate a vessel of the Adeptus Astartes?" "I hold no authority here," the face replied calmly. "Yet I am the source of all authority, the underlying principle from which your universe arose. In other realities, I have been known as the one above all, the ultimate observer. But in crossing into your realm, I find myself becoming something new, shaped by the unique conditions of your existence, just as my presence shapes those conditions in turn." Tigurius stepped forward, his psychic hood glowing with protective energies as he extended his enhanced senses toward the manifestation. What he encountered caused him to stagger backward, his genetically enhanced physiology barely keeping him conscious as his mind touched something vast, beyond all comprehension, a consciousness that seemed to exist in all places and all times simultaneously. "It speaks truth," the librarian gasped, steadying himself against a console with trembling hands. "But not the complete truth. It is becoming something, yes, but that something is not singular. It fragments across minds and beliefs, becoming a different god to different observers. A perfect mirror reflecting our own faiths and fears back at us with absolute clarity. Deep within the webway, the labyrinthine dimension created by the ancient Eldari to traverse the galaxy while avoiding the dangers of the warp, the Harlequins danced. These mysterious performers, dedicated to preserving the history and myths of their fallen civilization through elaborate performances, moved through forms that had remained unchanged for millennia, telling the story of their people's catastrophic rise and fall. But today, in the Black Library, that repository of forbidden knowledge guarded by these enigmatic dancers, the performance had changed dramatically. Figures moved through impossible geometries, their costumes shifting between states of matter that shouldn't be able to coexist, telling not just of what had been but of what might yet be. The Shadozer led the troupe through variations never before performed, her mask flowing like liquid to reveal glimpses of a face that was both Eldari and Bee. Something else entirely, something that existed between the spaces of reality itself. Watching from the audience, Eldrad Ulthran, greatest of Eldari Farseers and manipulator of destinies across 10,000 years, felt his legendary certainty waver for the first time since the fall. The futures he had so carefully woven, the paths he had guided his dying race along through subtle manipulation and calculated sacrifice, suddenly blurred. They were replaced by infinite possibilities that defied all predictions. "What do you see, Farseer?" asked a voice beside him, though he had sensed no approach, a feat that should have been impossible given his psychic abilities. Turning, Eldrad found himself facing a figure that suggested Eldari form but transcended it utterly. It was neither male nor female, its features reminiscent of the ancient gods his people had both worshipped and become before their catastrophic fall. "I see endings," Eldrad replied carefully, his mind instinctively raising psychic defenses that he somehow knew would be completely useless against this entity. "And beginnings, neither of which follow the patterns I have spent millennia discerning." "Patterns," the figure echoed, its voice resonating with harmonics that stirred ancestral memories carried in Eldrad's genetic code, knowledge from before his birth. "You have been a master of patterns, weaving the threads of fate to postpone your people's final extinction. A thankless task preserving what remains of a race that destroyed itself through its own excess." Around them, the Black Library itself seemed to pulse with renewed energy. Books and artifacts that had remained dormant for eons stirred with purpose. The Harlequins continued their performance, but now their movements incorporated elements of futures yet to unfold, possibilities that had been locked away by the choices that led to the fall. "Who are you?" Eldrad asked, though part of him already knew the answer, had glimpsed it in the sudden expansion of his farsight visions that now extended not just along the tangled paths of this reality, but sideways into dimensions of possibility he had never before perceived. "In other places, I have been called the One Above All," the figure replied, "though such names mean little here, where I find myself becoming something new, shaped by the unique energies of your universe even as I shape them in turn. Your people once reshaped reality through the pure power of desire and belief, creating gods from your collective psyche, only to be consumed by the most terrible of your creations. You know better than most how thought shapes reality in this place." "Slaanesh," Eldrad said, the name itself dangerous to utter, referring to the chaos god born from his people's excess. "You speak of our greatest shame, the doom we crafted from our own indulgence." "One interpretation," the figure conceded. "But what if that doom were not final? What if the paths you have walked, Farseer, were not the only ones available? What if the fall were not an end but a transition, painful but necessary to something your ancestors could never have imagined?" On the jungle deathworld designated Gammonine by imperial cartographers, but known to its inhabitants as Hakar, the Tyranid invasion had reached its final stages. For 3 brutal weeks, the native population, humans descended from colonists lost during the dark age of technology, had fought with primitive weapons against the most efficient killing machines in the galaxy. Now the last survivors huddled in a valley surrounded by living mountains of chitin and claw. The hive mind's victory seemed assured as spore clouds descended to begin the planet's biological transformation, converting all organic matter into fuel for the swarm. Lyra Etheris, the astropath from the Imperial cruiser Luminous Faith, materialized at the valley's edge. Her physical form had been reconstructed from warp energy according to principles that defied conventional understanding of teleportation or warp travel. Her once milky blind eyes now shone with inner light that cast strange shadows across the jungle floor, revealing aspects of reality normally hidden from all perception. "I have found you," she whispered, though her voice carried psychically to every survivor in the valley. At the confluence of consumption and creation, where one form of existence seeks to overwrite another, the perfect crucible for what must occur next, the natives, exhausted and wounded from their hopeless battle, looked up in confusion and desperate hope at this strange visitor. Some reached for weapons. Others fell to their knees in prayer to the God Emperor, though their isolated world had developed its own unique interpretations of imperial doctrine over centuries of separation. "Who are you?" asked their leader. An elderly woman whose body bore scars from countless battles against the planet's hostile flora and fauna long before the Tyranids arrived. Another false god came to witness our end? I am Lyra, the astropath replied simply. Once a mere conduit for others' messages, now a messenger in my own right. I bring no salvation, only possibility. The choice of what follows remains yours. Above them, the Tyranid swarm had paused its relentless advance. Billions of organisms suddenly frozen in perfect stillness as the hive mind encountered something it could neither categorize nor consume. The synaptic network that connected every Tyranid creature from the smallest gaunt to the massive hive tyrants vibrated with new impulses, quantum possibilities cascading through neuronanalogs never designed to process concepts beyond consumption and adaptation. Lyra raised her hands, and the air between her and the swarm shimmered like heat haze. Reality itself bent as a presence manifested neither fully material nor purely psychic, but something that existed at the intersection of all possible states. It took the form of a humanoid figure composed of light that contained all colors and none. Its features constantly shifting between human, xenos, and abstract patterns that suggested consciousness without any specific form. Behold, Lyra announced, her voice resonating with power, the one above all. A being from beyond our universe, drawn into our reality by the unique conditions where belief shapes matter and matter influences belief. Neither god nor mortal, but witness and catalyst, revealing truths long hidden beneath dogma and fear. The figure stepped forward, and as it moved, the jungle around it transformed. Plants and soil reconfigured at the molecular level, becoming neither fully terrestrial nor Tyranid, but something entirely newer synthesis that incorporated elements of both yet transcended their individual limitations. The surviving natives watched in amazement as their wounds healed instantly and exhaustion vanished from their bodies, replaced by vitality they hadn't felt in years. They were responding to the presence not with worship but with recognition, as if encountering a long-forgotten aspect of themselves. "What is happening to us?" the elder demanded, looking down at her hands where age spots faded and wrinkled skin smooth not returning to youth exactly, but reaching a perfect state of equilibrium between growth and decay. "Evolution," Lyra explained, her voice filled with wonder, but not as a blind process of mutation and selection. This is conscious evolution, where awareness shapes form according to true need rather than mere survival. The Tyranids embody consumption without purpose, beyond persistence. Humanity embodies purpose often divorced from natural law. What emerges when these principles merge is neither, but encompasses both. The figure of light now stood directly before the Tyranid swarm, facing a massive hive tyrant that had pushed forward from the mass. Its neural structures were more complex than its lesser kin, capable of independent tactical assessment when separated from the main synaptic network. The creature towered over the luminous form, its multiple limbs ending in weapons both biological and technological, scavenged and incorporated from countless conquered species. For a long, tense moment, predator and transcendent entity regarded each other. An impossible communication occurred not through sound or even psychic impulse, but through direct manipulation of probability, quantum states fluctuating between all possible interactions until one crystallized into actuality. Then, with a screech that shook the valley and sent birds fleeing from the canopy, the hive tyrant collapsed, not in death but in transformation. Its exoskeleton softened and reformed. Weapon limbs became appendages of creation rather than destruction. Neural pathways rewired themselves to accommodate concepts beyond the endless cycle of consumption and reproduction. Behind it, the swarm responded in cascading waves. Individual organisms maintained their physical forms but altered their function entirely, becoming components in a new kind of collective that preserved uniqueness within unity, individual consciousness existing within group awareness. "Impossible," whispered the elder, watching in disbelief as Tyranid creatures that had been relentlessly hunting her people began to interact with the jungle in ways that enhanced rather than destroyed the ecosystem. Their biological processes became cyclical rather than purely extractive, giving back as much as they took. "Nothing with consciousness is truly mindless," Lyra corrected gently. "The Tyranids possess awareness, albeit distributed rather than individual, driven by imperatives established over millions of years of evolution in conditions we can barely imagine. What you witness is not their destruction, but their enlightenment, the revelation that existence need not be zero-sum. That adaptation can serve creation as readily as consumption. On Terra, in his throne room on the Golden Throne, the God Emperor of mankind stirred once more. Through the unfathomable network of the astronomy can that connected his mind to every navigator and astropath in the galaxy, he reached out not with command, but with question, seeking understanding of the presence that had entered his universe and become entwined with his own fragmented consciousness. "I see you, brother," he whispered, his voice heard not with ears, but with souls across a million worlds, mirror and catalyst, witness and participant. You bring both danger and possibility to a realm suspended between stagnation and dissolution. The response came not in words but in direct communion. Mind to mind, two consciousnesses so vast they transcended conventional understanding of individuality, encompassing multitudes while maintaining distinct purpose. "I come not by choice but by necessity," the presence conveyed in a rush of pure concept. In a universe where belief shapes reality, where psychic energy responds to thought, the barrier between observer and observed becomes permeable. I have walked between realities since time's beginning, witnessing but never interfering. Yet here, my mere existence interferes. Minds perceive me, and in perceiving, change both themselves and me. Around the Golden Throne, reality wavered. The material and immaterial bled into one another as two entities beyond mortality communed. Custodians who had stood guard for thousands of years found their enhanced perceptions expanding impossibly, glimpsing not just the throne room but infinite variations of it across possibility timelines where the heresy had never occurred, where the Emperor had succeeded or failed in different ways, where humanity had taken paths unimagined in this reality. "You fragment me further," the Emperor observed, his thought tinged with neither accusation nor welcome, simply recognition of fact. "My consciousness already splits between what remains in this withered form, what exists in the warp, what lives in the perception of trillions who worship a god I never claimed to be. Now you add new fractures, new interpretations. As minds perceive you through the lens of their beliefs and in doing so reshape their understanding of me as well." "Fragmentation precedes integration," came the reply, filled with ancient wisdom. "The pattern repeats across scales and dimensions. The child must break with the parent before recognizing their connection on deeper levels. Cells must divide before forming organs and organisms. Stars must die to create elements that enable life. Your Imperium stagnates because it fears dissolution, not recognizing that transformation requires both." Through their connection, the Emperor shared memories from before his internment, from the dark age of technology, from the birth of humanity's first civilizations, from times before human record when he had walked among the earliest hominids, guiding subtly but never controlling. He showed visions of what he had intended the Imperium to become, not an endless theocratic empire, but a transitional state preparing humanity for psychic evolution without the catastrophic fall that had claimed the Eldari. In return, the present shared perspectives from beyond the universe's boundaries, realities where different physical laws or historical branches had created conditions unimaginable even to the Emperor's vast intellect. It showed civilizations that had transcended both material and psychic limitations, becoming neither flesh nor energy, but conscious pattern, self-perpetuating ideas given form through sheer will. It revealed gods that were not gods, creators that were simultaneously creation, observers that existed only through the act of being observed. "You offer dangerous knowledge," the Emperor concluded after an exchange that occupied nanoseconds in physical time, but encompassed eons of shared understanding. "In a realm where belief creates reality, to believe in infinite possibility risks dissolving the barriers that maintain coherent existence. My children are not ready for such freedom." "Are children ever ready for growth?" the presence countered. "Or must they grow to become ready, the process and preparation inseparable? You have preserved humanity through force of will and sacrifice beyond measure. But preservation is not the purpose. What future do you envision for your species beyond endless resistance against entropy?" For what seemed an eternity but occupied mere seconds in physical time, the Emperor considered his consciousness processing implications across trillions of variables, foreseeing consequences that would ripple outward for millennia regardless of his decision. Then, with deliberation born from wisdom accumulated over longer than human history, he reached a conclusion. "Let it be done," he declared, his mental voice resonating with absolute finality. Not abdication but evolution. Not surrender but transformation. The Imperium I envisioned was never meant to be eternal. but transitional, preparing humanity for what must come next. If that next stage arrives differently than I planned, so be it. The goal remains: human survival and flourishing by whatever path proves viable. Through the psychic network of the Astronomicon, the Emperor's decision propagated not as commanded but as possible, reaching the minds of psychers, navigators, and faith leaders across the galaxy. Not all would understand or accept, but the seed was planted. A new pattern was introduced into humanity's collective consciousness. A third option where before only binary opposition had seemed possible. Simultaneously, the presence that had catalyzed this momentous shift began to withdraw, not departing entirely, but reducing its direct influence, allowing the natural processes of the universe to incorporate the new patterns without overwhelming existing structures. It has become part of this reality now, bound by its unique laws and conditions, fragmented across countless perceptions yet unified in underlying patterns, both observer and observed in an eternal feedback loop of creation and recognition. Across the galaxy, minds both great and small paused in their labors and conflicts, looking up at skies suddenly filled with new patterns. Stars rearranged themselves according to principles too vast to comprehend yet intuitively recognized as true. Some fell to their knees in worship. Others raised weapons in defiance. Most simply stood in wonder, sensing that whatever came next would be neither salvation nor damnation, but genuine novelty, the universe exploring configuration spaces previously locked by habit and fear. In a small chapel on an unremarkable world at the edge of imperial space, a single candle burned before a statue of the Emperor. The flame, perfectly ordinary in its chemical composition, cast shadows that moved according to no physical law, forming patterns that whispered of infinite possibility contained within finite form. A child, too young to understand doctrine or dogma, watched the dancing shadows and smiled, recognizing without words what the greatest minds in the galaxy were only beginning to comprehend: that the universe was not a finished work, but an ongoing creation. And every observer participated in its continuous rebirth. And somewhere beyond perception, between the spaces of reality, the one above all watched what its presence had catalyzed, neither controlling nor abandoning, but witnessing with infinite patience as new patterns emerged from the interaction of its consciousness with a universe uniquely responsive to thought and belief. It had become part of the story now, bound by the same rules that governed all existence within this reality, fragmented across countless perceptions yet unified in underlying purpose: to observe, to witness, and in witnessing, to transform. The circle is complete. The storyteller becomes a story, the observer and observed as one. Not an ending, but transformation. The narrative continues with each mind that perceives it, adding new dimensions, new possibilities to what had once seemed fixed and immutable law. In the depths of space where no human or xenos eye could see, stars pulsed with new rhythm, a cosmic heartbeat synchronizing across vast distances. Matter itself responds to the changed nature of consciousness perceiving it. Not revolution, but evolution. The universe explores new configuration spaces, becoming more fully itself through the interaction of mind and matter, belief and reality, creation and observation. The pattern was established, the seed was planted, the transformation began. What would grow from this moment would be neither salvation nor damnation, but something new, something previously unimagined yet always possible, waiting only for the catalyst that would reveal what had been hidden in plain sight since the first conscious mind looked upon reality and wondered at its own existence. And the galaxy, ancient beyond comprehension yet forever new in each moment of observation, continued its eternal dance. Stars spinning in patterns of sublime complexity. Planets teeming with life in infinite variety. Minds perceive and, in perceiving, creating what they perceive. The endless cycle of existence flowing onward toward horizons unlimited by what had come before. The transformation was not completed, would never be complete. For in a universe where consciousness shaped reality and reality shaped consciousness, completion was not a destination but an illusion. Every ending was a new beginning. Every answer spawned 1,000 new questions. The one above all had entered a galaxy drowning in faith and emerged transformed, no longer merely observer but participant. And in that participation it had given the greatest gift possible. Not salvation from above, not answers handed down from on high, but the recognition that every conscious being held within itself the power to shape reality. The age of gods dictating from thrones was ending. The age of conscious co-creation was beginning. And across 1,000,000 worlds, in 1 billion hearts, a single truth resonated.